Internets, welcome back to another episode of the Premium Pete Show. Man, it sounds clear through these headphones. Shouts to Stitcher. You know what time it is. Whenever I have this man in the building, my friend Chris Morrow, we're going to be talking about podcasting. But more importantly, we're going to talk about life in podcasting. And I think before we named this the state of podcasting, but now we're going to talk about 2019 podcasting. Chris Morrow, welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Burr.
Burr.
You know, it's funny. Somebody told me that. You know, it's funny. I think I was on a Talk Architecture episode, and some guy was there, and was like, "Oh, big fan, Premium Pete." He's like, "I love when Chris Morrow's on," and he says "burr" now, and I'm like, "Oh, well, you know, he's graduated." You know, so. But look, it's funny. A lot. What I love about our episodes is that people get a chance to really understand a little bit more about podcasting. You've been right so far on a lot of things, you know. I think one of the big keys we left off with before was that it's going to change.
Yeah.
Big companies are going to come in. Your only hope is, and I'm a fan and agreeance with you, that it keeps some of the soul.
Yeah.
You know, First of all, anyway, about that. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. Thank you. Yeah.
How's everything? You know, for people who may not know, I know that you suffer from Lyme's disease.
That's right.
Still no type
Cure?
of cure. I'm not saying that they found the cure that quick, but
No.
meaning like, do you foresee them to ever try to find? I mean, it can't be something that they can't find anything that could really help. You know?
Well, I don't know if I talked about this the last episode, but I do believe that Lyme's disease is a big epidemic that's only going to get bigger in the next 10 or 15 years, unfortunately. And I think a lot of people are going to start getting it. And I think, you know, some people might even be listening to this and just kind of have this moment in their mind, be like, oh, I remember that guy talking about it on Pete's podcast. It's everywhere. The areas that it's present in are growing significantly in America. It's in New York City. It's in Central Park, it's in Prospect Park. If you live in the suburbs and you got a little plot of grass in your backyard, it's there. So, you know, not to scare people, but I do think that Lyme disease has become one of these things that, at least in the media, people like to make fun of parents in particular for being overprotective of. You know, like, oh, you know, there are those parents worried about little Johnny getting a tick bite, whatever.
Sure. Yeah.
Everybody gets tick bites. Or, you know, especially maybe like middle-class white people like me freaking out about it. It's kind of like avocado toast, like it's something to make fun of people about. My message to you listeners is take that shit seriously. If you get a tick bite, white, black, Asian, doesn't matter, young, old, take that shit seriously. Do some research, do some homework. There's a lot of conflicting advice on how to handle it, but educate yourself. And but don't just brush it off because it's real and it can take a while for it to hit, which is what happened in my case. So again, not to be a downer, not to scare people, but the ticks are out there. They're biting people. They're fucking people up. And when you ask, is there a cure? No, there's not a cure. And okay, then the next question is, right, why isn't there a cure? There's a segment of people who believe that this is actually kind of a government conspiracy gone wrong. Lyme's disease is called that because it originated or was first, quote unquote, discovered in Lyme, Connecticut, which is not too far away from here. And another thing that's in Lyme, Connecticut's right on the Long Island Sound. Mm-hmm. And right outside of Lyme, Connecticut, apparently I've never been there, is an island right in the bay or the coast. And for many years, for 60, 70 years, I think, that's where the U.S. government conducted all its biochemical testing and its experiments on animals, you know, trying out different, you know, diseases or chemical warfare sort of stuff. And there's a belief that whatever the component of Lyme disease that's making, people have been getting bit by ticks for thousands of years. We know that. People haven't been getting sick till recently. So the idea, or the theory rather, is that they cook something up in this, you know, laboratory, because what would be better to destabilize the Soviet Union than a disease that's transferable through ticks and it makes people sick, but you can't really tell what's going on, blah, blah, blah. And somehow somebody screwed up. It got out of the bay into the local area, and from there it spread. That's just a theory, but it is strange that I mean, I just saw a statistic the other day. There's more cases of Lyme's each year than AIDS, than hepatitis, but these are diseases that get a lot more publicity.
So how do you even know like symptoms from it? We spoke about this, before, but not. I don't think about this where, like, you are getting older, right? So
how much of this is not just me? Is my leg? Am I losing muscle tone in my leg because I have Lyme disease or because I'm an old man? I don't know, and that's kind of the thing that makes it more difficult. Some of the symptoms I've had, a lot of them are neurological, and like that's pretty clear cut. The type of fatigue I've had is pretty clear cut, but there's no definitive way to really figure out what it is. And a lot of people think that it's in your head or I was taping Brilliant Idiots the other day, and I was complaining about something, and Andrew Schultz was like, "You don't have fucking Lyme. There's nothing wrong with you." And I was just like, "This is
this is what people think.
This is what it is," and I'm guilty of it. I had a very close friend, my best friend for almost 2 decades. Rest in peace. He had Lyme's disease, and he would be sick sometimes, and then other times he'd be out partying and drinking and doing drugs. And I was like, "This guy's not fucking sick. If this guy was really that sick, he would never do this stuff. He would just get better." Because you kind of believe, okay, you have a disease, there's a cure, you follow whatever the doctors tell you, and you get better. And he ended up committing suicide. How much of that was the Lyme's, I can't really say, but like, I'm way more sympathetic. I mean, I almost wrote his mother a letter the other day. Like, I see what this guy was going through, and some days you can feel fine. And, I'm a grown man dealing with it. I mean, I'm trying to imagine what I would have been like at 19.
Yeah.
It's,
well, first off, prayer's always up that you could find more and more information.
Yeah.
And especially, here's something even crazier. Being, the co-founder of Loudspeakers Network, being in podcasting so long, being in radio so long, would you want to bring onto the network, say, a health or remedy podcast like that? Because I remember you told me you listened to a Lyme disease podcast. Is that true? You tell me, or something like to do?
Yeah,
it's a while ago. I think you're telling me.
I think I talked about this last time. That I do think out of all the fields that are out there, all the different lanes that people could go in, I do think health and wellness is the one that has the most potential
in 2019 too.
Going forward, absolutely. Because having spent a lot of time visiting doctors, kind of making the rounds, like what's very clear, even if Lyme's itself isn't clear, is that the medical system in this country is broken.
Yeah.
Very seriously broken. It doesn't work. The insurance, my insurance doesn't pay for Lyme's. I was doing my taxes last week. I don't even want to say how much I spent.
Yeah.
Out of pocket. I mean, it's insane. So I think that, and the other thing is the more time you spend going around to doctors and making the rounds, you start to really understand that doctors are making educated guesses. They don't really know. They don't really have.
Sure.
Because our bodies are like incredibly complex. No two people are the same. No set of environments are the same. So, they can say do X, Y, and Z, and, 70% of the time that might work. But what happens when you're in the 30%? And we don't really have anything in this country that addresses that. And I just think that people are going to be becoming more and more concerned with and aware of wellness moving forward. I just think it's going to become a huge space. I think it's already a huge space, and I think it's going to get bigger. And I think, podcasts will be one component of it. The thing is, and I'm guilty of this myself, is when you're feeling bad, you spend all your time listening to podcasts and Googling things and reading newsletters and gathering information. The second you start to feel better, you don't want to see any of that shit anymore. You're like, I don't even want to touch this stuff.
Yeah.
I want to pretend like this stuff isn't out there because it's depressing.
Yeah. You're over it already.
You're over it. So I think what's going to be big going forward is wellness as just a lifestyle rather than as a reaction to something that's broken, right? Don't let it break.
Sure.
And, this is a conversation that, we've had off the mic just about as you're getting older and, you're going into middle age and, you see people getting sick around you and struggling, like how important this stuff becomes.
Yeah. You know, it's crazy, too, because when I think about YouTube, I think about how many people look to YouTube for remedies and how to do things and how to find out things, right? If you think about it, I don't want to say it's underrated. I'm not going to say that because I think that I am amazed at how many people go to YouTube. I mean, I've spoken to people who go to YouTube to learn how to change their brakes.
Right.
I've changed a refrigerator filter through YouTube. I fixed my thermostat in my house one time through YouTube. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, like, you know, we are in an information grabbing stage where people, you know, I like your point, though. Once you're kind of away from this, you may move on to it. But I think people are dying for information on how to or similarities of stuff that people are going through.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, YouTube is literally where I diagnosed myself.
Yeah.
My first symptoms were fasciculations, which are basically kind of ripples along your skin or fluctuations of your skin on my calves, and I was like, what the fuck is this?
Yeah.
And I was on YouTube and I typed it in just because I could see what was happening on my leg, and I wanted to see an image of somebody else. And like I saw somebody who was having the exact same thing on their leg, and the first comment was, that's either Lyme's or ALS.
Where did you get bit?
I got bit on my leg.
Okay. Oh, wow.
Yeah. And that freaked me out because I was like, ALS is a death sentence.
Yeah.
So I was like really depressed for a few months because I thought maybe I had ALS. And then it started to present itself more as Lyme's. But, you know, just in terms of the self-research thing, you know, I had a doctor tell me not too long ago, he's like, you got to understand, you know more about Lyme's than 90% of the doctors in America right now because you've researched, you've asked questions. I'm also in a position where I'm a writer, so research is something that kind of comes naturally to me. So I get into it. But he's like, you didn't go to medical school, but you have more information than most of these doctors. The flip side of that coin is you can take yourself, you know, I diagnosed myself with ALS initially. That's not a smart thing to do. You know, there are a lot of people out there who are using Google and YouTube to give themselves cancer, to give themselves MS, to give themselves a lot of stuff. And if you're not careful, you can go down that dark hole, and it takes a long time to come out. So I think you have to be very judicial. You know, you use those tools to educate yourself, but you try to leave the actual diagnosis to a doctor who you trust. And that's the other thing, you know. I've probably seen 50 doctors over the last few years. I was someone who always kind of trusted doctors implicitly. It's a doctor. He knows or she knows what they're talking about. Now I'm like, you know, you gotta win me over. I think you gotta, you know, the biggest thing, and I think this is true for anyone who's been through any sort of medical crisis with yourself or your family, is you just got to be your own advocate. You know, you gotta fight for yourself.
That's the most important thing.
Yeah.
You know, listen. Anyway,
that was your Lyme's public
disease.
Service announcement. Back to our regularly scheduled programming.
You know, as we move back to talking about podcasting, in 2019, okay, you know, a lot has changed, okay, but nothing that you didn't say would happen, okay.
Right.
Big companies are coming and they're acquiring other companies. We've seen that where Spotify acquired Gimlet.
Yeah.
We you know, which was tremendous. Did that take you by surprise?
Did that take me by surprise? I'd heard rumblings about it for a few months. The size of the deal took me by surprise. I think it took everybody by surprise.
No, you mean money-wise?
Money-wise. So Gimlet, which is one of the kind of premier podcasting networks, a network that, you know, Loudspeakers collaborated with on Mogul with, was sold to Spotify, and the listed price was $230 million, which is
tremendous.
A lot of fucking money. A lot of Gimlet employees doing all right for themselves. I saw Matt Nelson coming out of Kithel and Flatbush with 7 boxes of Jordans and Joe Budden's old sweatpants. So,
oh my God.
Those guys did very well for themselves, and I'm happy for them. But I think it did kind of shock a lot of people in the industry just how much money Spotify spent on Gimlet, and then also what the ramifications were, you know, of that happening.
So they also acquired Anchor, right?
Acquired Anchor as well, and I was recently at a podcasting conference where the guy who started Anchor was speaking, trying to explain exactly what Anchor is and does. And to be honest, I still don't know what they do, but obviously Spotify sees something there.
Yeah. So what does that mean? So with a deal like that, where Spotify comes and spends $230 million and acquires Gimlet,
Yeah.
like what does that mean for podcasting? Like meaning from, look, there's people who turn on mics and do podcasting every week, and there's people who do it and do it for a living. There's people who do it for fun. There's people,
right?
But overall, in the grand scheme of things, this is a big deal. It's, what does it mean?
Well, I think for the short term, what it means is that Spotify has gone from a company that acts as a platform for people's content to a company that is creating content. And they signaled that to a smaller degree with Budden.
Yeah.
Amy Schumer, I guess, was the other big acquisition they had. But now they're going to become a content creating network themselves in a way that Apple hasn't. Apple's kind of, for the most part, stayed at being a platform, at least when it comes to podcasting. So, I think it's not exactly the same, but in some ways it's similar to a Netflix model maybe, where Netflix just started as a platform where you could stream movies, and now obviously they create a lot of shows on their own. So in some ways, I think it's really great for the industry because Spotify has money and people have ideas for shows that previously they weren't sure how to make on their own or didn't have the resources to make. And now, just like filmmakers don't have to just rely on the Hollywood studio system anymore, they can go to a Netflix, and a lot of them, for them, Netflix is the first choice now.
Yeah.
So now as podcasters, there's an outlet where you can go, in theory, hopefully, and get somebody to fund your project. Now, we're probably not talking about podcasts like this where we just turn on the mics and start talking, because unless you're a big celeb with a huge following, I'm not sure they need that. But for a scripted podcast, something closer to mogul, yeah.
Or a crime series type style.
Crime series, yes. We like crime series. So I think it opens up that possibility. And then, I think the hope is that then some of these other platforms follow suit. Maybe Apple says, all right, we're going to start paying for content. And then Pandora says, we're going to start paying for content.
Or Stitcher, yeah.
Stitcher already does pay for content. Yeah. That's where these headphones came from. So I think that's the good part of it. I think the slightly scary part of it is that now, and I've talked about this in previous episodes, everyone is going to expect a check. Everyone's going to want a check. And it was trending in that direction anyways. This just kind of accelerated it a lot.
There's tremendous amount of people doing podcasts.
Right.
Obviously from the last time we spoke till now, there's got to be 100,000 more podcasts, okay? Right. And it's funny you just mentioned about money, because everyone looks, I don't care, some people say, we're doing it for fun, but everyone looks to the next person.
Right.
Like what they're doing, how they're doing. So they eventually want to make money, or they want advice, or they want, and I don't blame them. Obviously, if you're doing content and you want to try to make money, but unfortunately, not everyone can make money doing this. Right. When we spoke, we had a couple of episodes about podcasting, but we spoke about even like as low as, say, 25,000 download streams can make you get an advertiser, a sponsor on an episode. Do you still believe those numbers are eligible to warrant somebody to get a sponsor on their podcast?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you have a better chance of getting it now than you did even 6 months ago.
Why is that?
Because there are a lot more companies in the ad sales game in podcasting now. We have a relationship with a company at Loudspeakers that we've used for the last 5 years, but every week it seems like there's a new ad agency reaching out. Hey, could we do business with you? And I think what you're seeing is a lot of companies that were kind of focused on digital ad sales are now pivoting and trying to get into podcasting ad sales. So if you have a show that does 30,000, 40,000, those aren't huge numbers, but there's so many people out there trying to get, in the ad game business that you might be able to find somebody who, would jump at that. I think, the danger of it is with so many people trying to sell podcast ad sales now, there's the danger or the temptation that they all kind of undercut each other. Yeah. And that then they end up driving the prices for the entire industry down. So if I'm trying to get in the game right now, what's the best thing I can do? He's giving you 70%. I'll give you 90%. Even if I don't make any money, I just need to get a foot in the door. Sure. And then everybody gets so used to it that 90 becomes the standard. So I think that's what you're seeing. But yeah, I think if you're a smaller show on the scale, there's somebody out there right now who wants to do business with you.
It's funny. We talked about YouTube.
Yeah.
And then I think about this. And I was talking to this with a couple of people. It's crazy when you think about this, but right. Say you have a podcast on YouTube and the episode gets about, I don't know, I'll just give you 750,000 views.
Right.
That probably gets you about $1,500 from YouTube. Right. Okay. But if it's an episode on a podcasting platform, I mean, you're looking at probably 50,000, 100,000. No, how crazy is it that video is so sexy, but audio is where the money's at? Is it because it's the infrastructure of podcasting?
No, it's because the case has been made, and so far it's held up that there's more engagement in an audio ad, in a host-read audio ad. So, if you go on YouTube, you're going to see any one of these thousands of video things that you can click out of after 4 seconds, 5 seconds, depending on what the setup is. Take that versus a spot where me and you are talking about a Casper mattress that we had last night,
Well, me and you didn't have a Casper
right.
mattress.
Somebody would have said a word in here, but I don't do that.
No,
so,
somebody playing with you.
Right. So, but you know what I mean? Like, okay, Blue Apron. You could have come over to my house. We could have cooked some sea bass.
Absolutely.
That's okay.
Love it.
Right. So that's a much more engaging ad. We started talking about cooking it, and you burn this, and we ate that. And it feels like part of the show in a way that an ad, just a straight video ad that gets dumped in the middle of your YouTube content, is never going to feel that way. And so far, it seems that's held up. It seems that there's a much higher level of engagement for these. Now, not every podcast ad is the same way. If you just hand a podcast host a sheet of paper, they don't know anything about it.
Sure.
But, let's say, GOAT, the sneaker.
Sneaker consignment app, yeah.
They were on Brilliant Idiots.
Mm-hmm.
I got a pair of sneakers off of GOAT, I was showing it to them. Mouse Jones was on. He was, saying this. Schultz was saying that. It became part of the show. It became part of the fabric of the show. And that makes the listener much less likely to press fast forward. And then the ad sticks around. And if it's something that makes sense for them, they might actually go out and buy it. So I think that's why, even though the audience numbers are smaller, the ad CPMs, which is the standard by which you sell podcast ads, that number is actually higher than video.
It's funny because I remember when we were starting with the Combat Jack show.
Yeah.
I remember one thing I loved about host-read ads by us, by Combat, by whoever, even sometimes it was multiple
right.
people. One thing I loved is that, people, and I don't know if people still feel this way. I want to say I believe so, but when they heard us talking about an ad, they're like, oh, okay, these motherfuckers, they got something here. You know
Reggie
what I mean?
really shaved his head with bevel.
No, but they were happy that we were meaning they knew that we were basically telling them look, we just got sponsored. Okay, we're going to make some money for us. You get all this free content.
But there was a problem with that too.
Go ahead.
And that was, to me, tax was always the classic example of this. So for a long time, most of the podcast audience has been white middle class listeners who kind of came up out of that NPR PBS world, right?
Okay.
And why that's significant is they're used to this idea of, hey, we're giving you content for free, but you're going to support us, right? PBS fundraisers, give $50, we're going to give you a tote bag. NPR, whatever they gave away. So they were kind of conditioned. So like when this podcast thing came around and it was like, you're not going to pay for this show, but when we have this advertisement for stamps.com, you're going to get some stamps maybe if you don't really need them or not, because we understand, we've been trained, conditioned, this is the way we support something that we love. Whereas when Tax started getting ads, I can remember his audience, people, tweeting him and being like, yo, you made it, man. You made it. And I kept telling him, you didn't make shit. You got one ad. It's only coming back if they support you.
Sure.
And you gotta spell it out for your audience. You actually have to say, listen, the way you keep the show going is by getting the mattress, buying the toothbrush, getting the bevel, whatever the case may be.
Telling a friend.
Just because they're on 1 week doesn't mean they're coming back, because these are all direct response ads, right? So they're waiting to see how many people buy the razor using premium code, premium peak code, tax idiots, whatever the case may be.
Sure.
And if they don't hit those numbers, they're not coming back the next week. You got to tell your audience that. You got to explain to your audience, this is how you're going to support me to help me keep doing this show. Whereas someone who kind of came up watching PBS or listening to NPR, they already know because they've been buying the tote bag. And I think that for, hip-hop podcasts in particular, like, it took a while for the audience to kind of understand, like, no, these guys didn't make it just because they got an ad. They make it when they keep the ads.
Yeah.
And the way they keep the ads is the audience buys the product.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. And that's how you hear ads stay for a longevity amount of time on a podcast.
Yeah.
A lot of, I'm sure you get hit up all the time. I get hit up all the time from people with questions about podcasting, wanting to come onto the network, wanting to do this, wanting to do that. It's funny, before we mention about that maybe smaller podcasts have a chance to get advertisers. For people listening, especially smaller podcasts who are very eager and want to try to, possibly make some money. How the hell do they even reach an advertiser? Like, if it's not somebody they know on their own? Like, meaning, like, if they don't know, like, a local shop that's willing to sponsor them. I'm talking about, how do they reach, like, real advertisers?
I actually think local is the way to go if you're a smaller show.
Yeah.
I think that's actually, because, right, if you listen to, Power 105, half the ads are such and such, Toyota in Bay Ridge, such and such Cadillac in Bayonne. Like, it's local spots.
Yeah.
Like, that's something I'm kind of following with the weed industry too, right? Like, there's a lot of money, there's a lot of weed companies who are trying to, get information out about them, but maybe they can't advertise, or they don't see the point in advertising in states where,
it's not legal.
It's not legal yet. But hey, if you're in Colorado, if you're in Massachusetts, if you're in Washington State, like, I would be hitting up local dispensaries and trying to make, even if you get some product, like, that's a win. So I think the local strategy actually makes a lot of sense for smaller shows.
Yeah. Have you smoked weed in the last years of your life, as far as meaning in your now in your 40s? Have you smoked?
Yeah. I actually had a really bad reaction with the Lymes. I was taking a medicine that gave me, like, a really intense reaction. It's actually it took me a while to figure out. It's called derealization, and it feels like you're basically living in an alternate life. It doesn't sound that scary,
really?
But it was like the most terrifying thing that ever happened to me in my life. And for some reason, smoking was what set it off. So, and it took me like a couple months to get rid of it. So after that, I just had to stop. And it's really disappointing for me because I was a huge smoker for a long time.
Yeah.
And now it's like, this is like, you can argue about, like, what was the golden age of hip hop? What was the golden age of movies? Or this is the golden age of weed smoke, from what I can tell. Like, everywhere I look, it's like people are smoking, really nice weed. They're smoking, like I told you, Pete has me out, reviving my sneaker life. I'm out. What's the one down here?
Stadium Goods.
And they have those streets with the little, like, stoops in front of it.
Yeah.
And the whole thing is nothing but, like, 20-year-old kids just sitting outside on the stoop smoking, weed. And I'm like, this is beautiful, where was this when I was 20? You know, they were still Giuliani. They were fucking arresting people. So I can't really indulge. I would love to indulge. I'd like to get back at it, but for the time being, at least, it's not working for me.
Now, as far as loudspeakers, are you looking for some type of,
weed theme show? Yeah, I would embrace that. I'm working on a couple right now.
Yeah.
I think there's going to be a real sweet spot between the cannabis industry and podcasting.
Why do you say that?
Well, I think we don't have to worry about any sort of regulations for now. If we want to advertise something, there's nobody stopping us or telling us we can't. And I think in a lot of ways the two industries mirror each other. I think podcasting is a little further along in the development, but I think they're both industries that started off as the wild, wild west with a lot of energy and a lot of soul and a lot of excitement. And I think they're getting more corporate day by day. I think podcasting will get there first. I think with the Gimlet Spotify move, that's essentially the beginning of the corporate podcast era. And, I think there's going to be, in the not too distant future, like Marlboro is going to be selling weed or fucking Bear, or, it's going to get completely.
It's going to be sold at Wawa.
It'll be Burr, it'll be very buttoned up and all that shit. So.
Would you like a 20?
Right. I was talking to, I won't say what we're talking about, but Al Harrington, I was talking to you about that. I think it's Viola. Is that the name of his company?
Viola, yes, that's his company.
And I was telling him, I was kind of envious of him. I was like, damn, the cannabis industry is really where podcasting was 5 years ago.
Yeah.
It's
on that brink.
Yeah, so I was like, enjoy it now because it's gonna. Now he's in a different situation. I don't know what his, real situation is, but he might be under a little less pressure to build a company up and sell it. And I think he's really doing it because he's into it and he cares about it. But I was like, it reminds me, just hearing him describe what he's doing and the projects he's working on, I was like, man, this really reminds me of where podcasting was.
Even with someone like Berner, who I had on, who owns, is one of the founders of Cookies.
Sure.
And him telling us on an episode that we did that credit company, credit like Swiss companies are coming and trying to buy they offered him $800 million for Cookies. Not him, meaning a whole group of people who own Cookies.
Shit.
But some of it's like stocks and things that,
you know what I mean? Who's real and who's fake.
Exactly. But what I mean is people are coming in that world because keep in mind, you're right. When you say that, and I think we said this off air a bunch of times about being in the heyday of weed.
Right.
When could you think of a better time? I mean, it is about to get real, meaning in New York, in Jersey, in all over the world, you're going to be able to go and buy weed just like you're able to buy a pack of cigarettes.
Oh, I mean, I went to this place in L.A. last time I was in L.A. This is probably a year ago. I think it's called MedMen.
Okay.
And they were trying to really position it as the Apple store of weed, and it was really upscale. And, you would go to, they had tables laid out like Apple Store, and they actually had iPads, and you would, the type of strain you wanted to buy, they would have a description of it on the iPad, and it would show you the different strains and the history, and, you could, zoom in and look at the buds, and I was like, this is beautiful. And then you come back to New York, and I'm like, this is, fucking barbaric here. And it's going to be like that everywhere. And I'm like, I guess my kids are just going to grow up being heavy weed smokers because, how do you? I mean, it is kind of true. I'm like, I can't imagine what I would have been like at 17 if I think of all the hustles I did to buy weed in Philly in 1985. Can I imagine what I've been doing if you could have just walked into a high-end store and
that's sick.
Had this at your fingertips?
Or even they were able to grow the strains like they are. I mean, literally people are chefs these days, so to speak,
Oh, yeah. My wife is really into watching shows on Netflix about wine and the history of the wine and the soil it was grown in and the different strains and this tastes like that and that has hints of that. And I was like, and there's there's billion-dollar industries built around that, right? Out in California, and you can go and spend the weekend or even on Long Island, and you go to this winery, and then they serve you this and the food, and it's an experience. And I'm like, it's 2-3 years, it's going to be weed versions of that everywhere. Yeah. You can see this is the field we're growing it in, and this is our hemp-infused, lasagna, whatever
Sure. And they also, they're doing it now, a lot of underground stuff, but, they have even, weed maps, you know what I mean? And
I saw they have a store in downtown Manhattan.
Yeah. So they have places in LA where you could call like an Uber Eats.
Yeah.
And just pull up and grab yourself. I mean, it's that crazy. But before we move on to the next thing, I do want to say when we were speaking about those smaller podcasts and we spoke about local advertisement. But if they did want to try to reach out to someone, what advice would you give them? You know what I mean?
I mean, I would just go online and do a little investigating, and in 10 minutes you'll see who the players in the game are. And then it's just a matter of, kind of making a case for yourself.
Sure.
Maybe make a little deck. But it's really a numbers game. Like, if you have the numbers, someone's going to do business with you.
What's the, you get emails all the time, like we spoke about. What's some of the worst emails you ever got, like, as far as, like, people, like...
I have one guy who's been sending me emails trying to shock me.
Yeah, what
He's
do you
like, you fucking Jew piece of shit, and Charlemagne is, I won't say, and Andrew Schultz is a Nazi, and in big caps with like exclamation marks. He's like, now that I have your attention, listen to my podcast. But he just kept hitting me with it. At a certain point, I was like, I might have to just listen to this guy's podcast. But then I was like, no, I'm not listening to this shit. Fuck that.
Oh man, that's some pitch, man.
Like every day for a week, just like the filthiest stuff.
In the podcast world, do you think that we have a company that's really providing analytics to a full level? I mean, I feel like there's a space for that. There are
a lot of startups. That's like kind of the biggest, hottest thing right now, is the startups that instead of working with you, the podcast creator, they'll work with your ad agency to give even much more detailed metrics that might be available through a SoundCloud or an Apple. Yeah. And they're actually, I know a number of people, one of them, I won't say, but like a lot of people have left their jobs in sales and joined these startups, taking equity in these startups. And they're, the hope is at some point one of the big boys is going to say,
come and acquire them.
I'll take you, and you go from 0 to 100 just like that.
Because keep in mind, and this is important, and we strive. I mean, look, I walked into rooms to try to get advertising. A couple of years ago, felt I had it on the hook.
Right.
And what's the difference between radio and podcasting? People get cold feet. They don't know. We want to try it out. We want to get a test. Right.
Right.
So keep in mind, if you did have tremendous analytics, because we're at a point where, remember, when we were doing it, people were like, oh, you got a podcast? That's cute.
Right.
Now they're like, there's companies right now, like tomorrow or today or whatever day anyone's listening to us, people like, podcasting, we need to get into that space.
It's a gold rush right now.
Yeah. So think about it. You get to a point where if you're able to provide powerful analytics for these companies, what else could they say? They have to believe in it, no? Meaning the advertisers.
Yeah, and I think what your argument becomes is I have a niche audience that you might not be reaching with some of the bigger numbers. You don't know who's listening. And what I'm making the case is, okay, I only got 8,000 people, but I'm hitting 8,000, African American women between the ages of 18 to 35, or I'm hitting 6,000 Asian men between 25 and 45, and you just happen to have this product that's your core audience, and all you need is 3,000 or 4,000 people who are really likely to buy this thing. I think that's always the argument. I think what's going to happen is you're going to have one podcasting space where it's just these massive shows with massive audiences, and they'll do really well, but then you'll have a lot of niche shows that really hit a specific demo, and they'll have a value to them too. It's just going to be, I was talking to somebody today, as a matter of fact, who was doing that, who's trying to reach a very niche audience, and they have small numbers, but it's a very specific audience. And I was like, you can sell that, and that's great. You just got to keep in mind that at 7,000, listens per episode, you might be able to attract somebody, but you're going to get $60 for the ad, or 100, whatever the case may be. Like, and if you're cool with that, and if you're cool with, all right, like I'm doing this, and this is covering some of my expenses, and maybe every other week instead of $150, I'm making 2, 3, 4. Like, if you're fine with that, that's great, and keep doing it. It's just from there to 230 million is a long jump.
Yeah.
You know, and you just got to be realistic about that.
Internets, listen, let's take a quick break. We're sitting here with my friend, co-founder of Loudspeakers Network, entrepreneur, Lyme disease survivor.
Thriver.
And driver.
Yeah.
Author.
Yeah.
Father, so much more.
Yes, sir.
Sneaker fiend as well, too.
Reborn.
Reborn. Internets, don't go nowhere. Be right back.
CHEA.
Brr.
Internets, hello! Put down your latkes and pierogis. You're currently listening to the Premium Pete Show.
And we're back sitting here with my guy, Chris Morrow,
Burr.
talking about just the life, podcasting in 2019 and more. You know, is it, what, almost about 20 shows on the network now?
Give or take.
You know, you know what I'm liking, and I'm seeing a lot of growth with is Van Lathan.
Van's great.
Red Pill podcast. I'm a fan of, you know, and I mean this wholeheartedly, of how honest he is.
Yeah.
With himself, his body, his life.
That whole Twitter thing about not wearing a shirt underneath his sweatshirt, that was cracking me up for days, man.
Yeah. No, I like him. And I think, you know, it's funny, too, because, again, you think about the days we were doing podcasts where people were like, oh, that's cute. And then you see something like that, and you're like, you know what, that kid has it.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it's going to pop today or a year from now, but he has it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think Van's in a great spot. I think for Van, the challenge is just figuring out what he wants to do.
Yeah.
Because I think he's got the type of versatility where he go in a lot of different directions. I think he could be like a straight news guy, but he's also really funny. And he likes mixing it up just a little bit. Like he likes getting a little messy, but not too messy. So, you know, it was really funny. I was literally talking to somebody about him last night, and I was kind of saying the same thing. Like, who do you think has the blueprint that Van should follow, right? Like, who is Van the next version of? And the person was like, there's nobody else like him. Like, he's setting his own path. And I was like, yeah, I think you're right. I don't think there's anyone out there where you can look at Van and be like, oh, he's the next whoever.
Even though a lot of people deal with obese problems in this world, and, you know,
Right.
I want to say this. I feel like the narrative so many times is somebody being poor and then getting rich, or somebody grew up struggling. Like we always say, like how we grew up when we didn't have much, and then you get something. I love the fact that this guy focuses on how overweight he was,
Right.
and how he transformed his life. I mean, don't get me wrong, you hear that, but keep in mind, I don't think people pay attention to the business of how important. There is billions spent of people going to the gym, and not everybody changes their life around.
Right.
Meaning the way they want to look.
Or yo-yo diets.
Yeah. I mean,
Right.
or anything. Weight Watchers. Look how long Weight Watchers is in business.
My mom's been on Weight Watchers for 40 years at this point. Like,
I mean, you know,
it's just like, it's tough.
Yeah, you know
know
what I mean? So what I'm saying is to see that guy, and I don't want to sit here and make this a Van Lathan
give him his
thing,
props.
but I am.
Yeah.
I am. You know me. Listen, I never have a problem doing that.
Right.
But I will say that it ain't easy. I have a lot of friends I grew up with, 500 pounds easy.
Right.
And they go back to 350 and 400.
Yo-yo.
It's not easy.
Yeah.
So to see him, I'm proud of that. And it's good to see podcasts like that give you more meaning than just a fucking podcast.
Right.
You know? Who else? But the Read is, man, how many years is the Read?
Reed just had its 6th anniversary show at
Fuck.
Town Hall, sold out show at Town Hall.
Like rock stars, they came
Rock
out?
stars, crowd going crazy.
Now, what do people do when they see you over there?
They don't say much.
No.
Nah.
The Brilliant Idiot fans love you.
Idiots fans know me. I get stopped on the street for idiots, but nobody really knows me through the Reed.
And
I was telling somebody I have a Reed tour jacket.
yeah,
Collector's edition. They don't make it in green anymore.
limited edition.
Right. And you know, I was at the first Saturday at Brooklyn Museum, hanging out. Nice scene, and I'm standing in front of a group of African American women, probably like in their, you know, like late 20s, early 30s, and I can feel one of them looking at my my jacket, and then one of them says, "Wow, that's interesting." And I was like, "Yeah." She's like, "Why is this fucking middle-aged white guy wearing a Reed jacket?" So, no, if people recognize me, it's definitely probably through idiots or I don't know, maybe Combat Jack.
Yeah, probably.
Maybe.
All There's a lot of other things. You know.
This show,
Yeah,
give yourself some props.
Possibly, yeah. I mean, listen, people love when you come on. It's I will say this though: when we think about the read, 6 years, and again, another one. I remember the day they walked in, and you and Combat had the idea of like, this is what they're gonna be like, and you and. I always say this, but I remember saying like, "Oh, who are these people? Like, we're the flagship show, Combat Jack show," and they went off to the races. They're rock stars. It's been amazing to see their growth. How after 6 years, like they're still like, I mean, look, we've been I don't know 8, 9 years. I feel like sometimes I'm like, oh man, enough of this shit. How do they still?
I think they feel that way too.
Yeah,
but. The thing I'll say about them is even if, sometimes I think, look, it's a drag to come to the studio every week.
Yeah.
Right? They really enjoy doing the show. You've been outside in the waiting area.
Sure.
You can hear the laughter through the walls.
Sure.
These are soundproof walls. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, whatever they feel the rest of the week, I can't really speak on it, but I know that when they get in the room together, and remember, they don't tape. I'm not in the room. The engineer's not in the room. Nobody's filmed. It's really just the two of them, and kind of the vibe they have is like so strong and so pure that they just go there every time.
Yeah.
And then when you see it in a live show, it's really impressive, just because you see just how much like the audience is connected to them and feeds off of them.
And hangs on every word or remembers
And
moments.
like Fury really owns the stage. I mean, for this show, like when they came out, the crowd was going crazy. Crystal sat down and he just walked around their chairs slowly once, and the crowd, like, he didn't say anything. He just his presence. He owned it. Like he had that entire room in his hands.
6 years ago, you brought them up to an undisclosed location.
Which is really got to say undisclosed now too for some reason. But yeah.
God, what were we doing? And what did you see in them? That you see today. You know what I mean? Is it everything that you imagined?
No, I didn't have any idea.
No. Well, you had some type of idea.
I just thought Fury was a really interesting person.
Yeah.
Because what had happened was he was a guest on Jazz Fly and NY Delight's show, Reality Check.
Rest in peace.
Rest in peace.
Check.
Rest in peace, Reality Check. And what happened was the Combat Jack show would record in one room, and then Reality Check would record in the adjoining studio right next door. And Jazz and NY Delight weren't really getting along, and they needed somebody to kind of be the referee or be in the middle of them. And Just Blaze would fill that role once the Combat Jack show was done. As soon as the Combat Jack was done taping, he would literally come out, go down the hallway, and then go in and kind of sit in with them. But because of timing, they needed somebody in there for a lot of time. So if you go back and listen to a lot of those early Reality Checks, I'm actually kind of like the third co-host in a way. I didn't even really want to be there, but they just needed me in the room to kind of... Sure. So I happened to be there when Jazz, and I give her the credit. She was the one, I want to bring this guy, Kid Fury, on. And he came on, and I was just like, whoa. Like, you just can tell when somebody has it. And I was like, this guy's got it. And afterwards I was like, oh, I think he needs to do a podcast, And I think he did an interview recently. I'm not sure where I read it, but I think even after I reached out to him, like, Jazz had to really convince him. It sounds like maybe he was like, I don't know what this is. I don't really listen to podcasts. I'm not sure. And I think she, was like, nah, give it a shot. Just try it. And then, my initial idea was like, oh, let's team him up with Fresh, because I knew that they were friends online.
Oh, Fresh Alina.
Yeah.
Shouts to Fresh Alina.
Yes. What she called me, the monotone poppy.
Yeah.
That stuck.
And she wants you to buy new couches.
Yeah,
but that's
not my couches, Fresh.
Studio.
You can't lay that at my feet. I'm not just these beat up chairs. Not those couches. So I was like, maybe you could hook up with Fresh. And he was like, well, I have this friend that, I talked to him on the phone and we just have great conversations. Could I try it with her? And I was like, yeah, fuck it, why not?
Now, was she from New York, or she wasn't? Crystal?
Crystal's from Oklahoma.
So she happened to be living in New York City too.
She had just moved, I think the story is, to New York. And I now realize that I did know who she was because Fresh had actually hired her or assigned her to cover Nas and Jay-Z's birthday party for Crunktastical.
Yeah.
And she ended up getting thrown out of the thing. And
Really?
she wrote like a really funny recap of it. And I remember reading the recap and being like, oh, this shit was hysterical. But I didn't realize that was her. So, so like they did it together and like that was that. And there's no turning back.
Yeah. You know, what Brilliant Idiots has been going on a long time.
Yeah.
You know, it's funny because I had Andrew Schultz on recently, and we were talking about like how that show has evolved.
Yeah.
But we also spoke about, like, did he ever think that there come a point in time where he wouldn't be doing it anymore? You know what I mean? Because the show has had ups and downs or whatever. What do you think has kept them together? Because, I mean, look, it's not easy. Like, let's be honest here. What we're talking about is podcasts. I've been doing it for years.
Right. We've been doing it for years, and you've been through the grind yourself. It's easy to get frustrated. It's easy to get disappointed or resentful or whatever the word is, when you're doing a show with somebody, and these shows have a million lives within those 5 or 6 years. You saw it with Combat Jack's show. That show had like a 6-7 year run. Within those 6 or 7 years, there were a million different little stories and ups and downs and this and that and intrigues. And like, that's kind of the nature of these things. And I think the beauty of it is that unlike a TV show or maybe some other platforms, like we get to really go all the way in those intrigues or those dramas. It's not buttoned up, and it can get really raw.
Sure.
But it can be exhausting for sure. With Schultz and Charlemagne, I think it kind of comes down to the same thing with Crystal and Fury. Like I think they just enjoy talking to each other because it's kind of a similar origin story. The origin story of Idiots is I actually met Charlemagne for the first time on the Combat Jack show. And I was talking to him afterwards. And
I just sent you a picture.
I sent me a picture. I didn't know who that was at first.
Yeah, I sent you a
you
picture
can see me in the
from
background.
that episode.
Yeah, that was
Classic.
crazy. That was
You look
dark-skinned
like you had a
Charlemagne.
hard day that day.
Yeah, I was looking like a drunk Irish uncle of mine or something. But
So go ahead.
So I met Charlemagne there, and I actually didn't talk to. I talked to him about working on a book project,
Which
ended up happening.
You did 2 books for him.
I ended up doing 2. So it was a momentous evening in retrospect. But through that, I developed a relationship with him, and then I was like, "You need to do a podcast," and he was still kind of like, "Why would I do a podcast? I'm on Breakfast Club."
Yeah.
And then I kind of sold him on the idea over, I would say a series of months. And then he was like, okay, I want to do it. And I said, who do you want to do it with? And there was a female comic. I won't say who it was. He said, I think I should do it with her. And it got as far as me speaking with her agent. And the agent was like, why should she do this? What's the value in this? We don't see the value in this. Why would they do it with a network? What do you really bring? Like, just kind of.
Sure.
And after a while, I was like, look, man, if you can't see it, I don't know what to tell you.
Yeah.
And I can promise you she made a mistake.
Yeah.
I haven't heard this woman's name in a long time.
Yeah.
I actually don't remember it, to be perfectly honest with you. And so I went back to Charlemagne. I said, this isn't going to work out, man. There's too much BS going on here with the agent. Who's next? What else are you thinking? He goes, well, Schultz from Geico. And I was like, well, I've seen him. And he goes, we have good phone convos. Do you think that could work? And I was like, yeah, I think so. Let me check him out. So Schultz was the guest. I think it was that guy Dante Nero's podcast.
Yeah.
It was the New York Podcast Festival, which was like really bootleg. It was like at the bar, some dive bar, in the basement rather of a dive bar on the Lower East Side. And I went down there. I bought a ticket for like $20, and it was Schultz, that guy Michael Shea, who's the anchor on Saturday Night Live, Dante Nero, and then like 2 other comics on this. And Schultz killed all of them. Like, he was really fucking good. And afterwards I was like, yo, man, like I think Charlemagne had told him I was coming, and I was like, he's like,
you're like a scout.
I was like a scout. I scouted him out. I was like, yo, man, you were funny. Like, you want to grab a drink? And we sat at the bar. And I was like, yo, like we're thinking about starting this podcast, man. Would you fuck with it? He's like, yeah, fuck it, let's do it. And it was like literally that easy. Like just being like, hey man, you're funny. You want to do a podcast with us? And he was like, yeah, let's do it. And no agent, no.
Sure.
To his credit, like he got it instantly. He was just like, yeah, I see what this is. Let's do it.
And it's funny, in retrospect, it's like I was telling him, do you know he is 10 steps ahead of comedians that have been doing it for 10 years? I'm explaining to you, or 20 years. I'm explaining to you because he has multiple platforms to push himself.
Right.
So now he has people that could come visit him from multiple cities that listen to him in the podcast. I feel like they know him before they even get to, like keep in mind, you go see a comic, you're like, oh, I've seen him before once or twice. Or whatever. They listen to him all the time.
Sure.
So it is amazing when you think.
Yeah, I mean, look, me and Andrew, like we've been bumping heads a lot politically.
Communist Chris, he calls it.
Snowflake, all sorts of shit. But I give him his credit in terms of the platform he's built. Like he's been very smart, and he's put in a lot of work.
Yeah.
He's definitely put in a lot of work.
Yeah. Is there any other shows we should be looking at from the network that you?
Well, we got a lot of stuff coming. I'd say a new one that we just launched is Bully and the Beast with Wax.
Wax is
from
a star.
the Idiots. Wax is a star. We were talking about this on the phone the other day. And L'Oreal, also a star. So that one's a little bit different. We're taking phone calls with that, which is a little bit of a new twist for us. So I'm excited about that. But that one has come out the gate and done really well.
Nice.
And I think the thing that's exciting about that is you'll sometimes launch a show and it'll have a strong debut, and then you watch half the audience go away.
Yeah.
And they've been really consistent for the first 2 months.
The last time you were on here, you were talking about that he wanted a lie detector test or something.
Wax,
like that.
I don't think Wax really understands what a podcast is sometimes because he's like, we need lie detector tests, and then he's like, the other thing we got to do is we're gonna have women go out on dates with guys, but they're gonna have an earpiece, and I'm gonna be telling them what to say in the restaurant. I'm like, that's cool. That's also a TV show. That's not a podcast.
Yeah.
I was like, why don't you just do the podcast, make it a hit, and then do the TV show? But he was so obsessed with the lie detector thing, they actually went on Amazon, and I found like some bullshit Cracker Jack lie detector test that they were selling for like $60, and I just bought it for him. And then he was going around for like a week after that, giving people a lie detector.
Did it work?
He claims it works. There's no way it fucking worked. Like it's like
some Cracker Jack.
It was like literally some shit you would get in like a Cracker Jack thing. So, but he is obsessed with the idea of giving people a lie detector test, and I hope to be able to help make his dream come true on that front.
Here goes another thing that we keep on saying with emails. I'm sure you get so many. Do people still bother you to come on the network?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and do you have any advice for them? If
Sorry, I'm probably not going to respond to your email. I got to be honest at this point.
Should they hit up? Why? I told you how long you should have got an assistant.
I know.
Am I still right on that?
Yeah, I'm too far gone at this point, and I feel really badly about it because I kind of prided myself on being somebody who would always respond to emails. I would never like get in a position where I'm just not responding. But the truth of the matter is, I'm probably not going to respond. Keep sending them. Yeah. You never know.
Well, I'll give you some advice. Say some funny shit in there to him, and then maybe he'll
How about
respond.
this? Here, I just came up with this off the top of my head. Send me a video clip, even though it's a podcast.
Yeah.
Send me like a 20-second trailer that I can watch. Because the problem is, like, even if someone like sends me a description of a show that sounds interesting and kind of intriguing, like the idea that I'm going to listen to like a 45, it's just not happening. I just don't have the bandwidth for it right now. Send me, make a little trailer. Because I've noticed people are making trailers for podcasts now, and I think that's the new move.
Yeah.
Your friend Chico Leo.
Shouts to Chico Leo.
He has a new podcast coming out.
What's it called?
It's called Sword and Scandal.
Oh, my God.
This is crazy. It's the history of mankind told through movies.
Wow.
So he's starting with Quest for Fire, and he's going to work his way all the way up to the contemporary world. And he put together like a 5-minute trailer. He actually has a friend who owns one of the biggest movie trailer companies in the country, like, who really puts together trailers for, first-rate, blockbuster type movies. And he somehow talked this guy into making a trailer for the podcast that incorporates all these movies set in ancient history. It's actually pretty good. So, like, something like that, I would actually, like, if you sent me a version of that, I would click it, right? But, I can barely listen to all of our own shows, let alone somebody else's show.
Yeah. So people listening at home, people listening on the train, people listening in the car, people listening on a plane, wherever they're listening. We spoke before about we spoke many times about this. But if you want to do a podcast, you do a podcast.
Do the fucking podcast.
Right?
Don't overthink it.
Stop comparing yourself and start creating. But I think we spoke obviously.
I need to do it. I haven't even made a podcast.
You
yet.
keep on saying this stuff.
Yeah.
Who's going to be your co-host over here?
I don't know, man. I don't think I'm gonna do something different. I just haven't figured out what it is. I keep changing my mind.
Well, speaking of that goes to some, as we wind this episode down, that goes to what I wanted to say. We spoke about health and wellness being an option.
Yeah.
What are crime is still big. Is crime still the biggest?
Yeah, I'd
podcast?
say crime is still. I mean, sports.
Sports.
ESPN, The Ringer, all these places, like they're really killing it with sports right now.
Yeah.
We're allegedly about to dip our toe into the sports arena, and I'm excited if we can get this thing off the ground. We might have a sports offering.
Well, I mean, listen, having podcasts in all different genres is what's important, to be able to be diversified
and scripted. I've said this the last 3 times we talked, but I'm still really
big on scripted.
Big on scripted. It was announced at South by Southwest yesterday. I mean, we've known about it for a while, but I'll say it here. We are bringing Mogul back, or more specifically, Gimlet is bringing Mogul back, and the first 2 episodes are going to be about Reggie's life, the Combat Jack story, and we've been talking a lot off mic about it and what it's going to sound like, and we're still in the process of really hammering that out and making it so that everybody close to it is comfortable with it. But I think we're going to get there, and I think that's going to be obviously for us it's going to be an emotional podcast.
Yeah.
But I think it's going to be a celebration at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And I've told you this, and I'll say it on the mic. And I also think it's something that Reggie would have wanted. So that's something to look out for. It's hard to say, check it out, or you're going to really like this. I mean, I don't know how you like it. You know what I mean? But I think you try to think of it as a celebration, and giving somebody who deserves respect that sort of respect and that sort of overview, and maybe it turns you on to something else. And I think that's the way you can try to look at it. And I think the mistake would have been not doing something. Yeah. So I'm hopeful and confident that we're going to accomplish something with that.
I'm hoping I hear it, and I want to hear more. So.
Well, it's 2 episodes. That's what Gimlet decided to do. Maybe we'll do it ourselves. We talked about that. We'll tell the rest.
Who knows? Listen, Spotify, we started off saying Spotify acquired Gimlet. How small networks, like, do you see people coming to try to acquire them as well?
I think so.
Yeah. So you don't have to be this tremendous Gimlet powerhouse to be acquired,
Well, listen,
do you
man,
believe in that?
Yeah, I do, because at the end of the day, it's content.
Yeah.
And somebody's got to create it, right? And if you have a proven track record of creating content that people like, that people fuck with, then someone's going to fuck with you. I mean, it's pretty much that simple.
Yeah. Listen, 2019 podcast. The year's not over yet, okay?
I mean, it's only March, and we've had 2 of the. I mean, we haven't. I won't get too into it because I don't know when this is going to air. But the day we're recording, it just happened today. Gimlet also unionized today.
What does that mean?
Well, they didn't actually unionize. They announced the employees announced that they're forming a union.
What does that mean? Break that down.
I don't really know. It means that the employees want to be part of, I guess it's Screen Actors Guild or Writers Guild. I can't remember which one it was, but essentially they want to have a say in the direction of the company and how editorial decisions are made and how hiring decisions are made and wages and compensation and insurance and all that sort of stuff. My interpretation of it is that's an issue that is becoming more important to kind of this next generation coming up now.
Sure.
I think it's BuzzFeed. Did BuzzFeed already unionize? But I
I
feel
think
like
so, yeah.
I'm not really that up on it, but I feel like that's something that people in their 20s really are passionate about now.
Yeah.
And, my guess is, I'm not in their shoes, but my guess is it's kind of a response to the freelance workforce model that's so prevalent now, where like everybody's doing freelance gigs and not getting insurance and not really getting compensated correctly. So I think, I think that's what's driving it. So we'll see how that plays out, but it's definitely an interesting development.
That's a big deal for podcasting.
Yeah.
With all the acquiring and stuff like that, do you think that, I know we started off saying that we hope it doesn't lose its soul, like we spoke about before, like it's about to
It's
get
already
real.
lost its soul.
No, but here's my thing.
Yeah.
Do you think that podcast can still be unfiltered, like people? Because some people are afraid.
Sure,
you can't
sure.
say certain things. It's a little bit.
It's going to get more and more censored, but we still have a couple years of being raw.
Okay.
The reason we have a couple more years is there's just so many podcasts. The police or whoever it is out there, making these decisions, they just can't keep up with all the content.
Yeah.
How is someone going to say Premium Pete, cursed 10 times on his episode? It's just there are too many shows. But as more of these shows gravitate to these platforms like a Spotify or let's say an Apple makes a move or a Pandora, I think what you're going to see is those platforms start to police internally those shows. And, it'll be interesting to see how that happens. What's going to happen the first time, Spotify says to Button, I know it feels important to talk about that, but could we avoid X, Y, and Z? We don't want you talking about the Michael Jackson hey, those conversations could have already happened. I don't know. But it's kind of inevitable, right? Whereas
Become a little bit more corporate-y.
Well, before they could say whatever the fuck they wanted.
Sure.
And they did. And, I think for now they probably still have the freedom, but, with money comes censorship. I mean, that's true in movies or music or anything. I mean, if you want the big money, you got to be prepared to kind of make some compromises.
Any new books you're working on?
Yeah, I just had a meeting the other day with someone who was very interesting.
Really?
Yeah.
We keep it on the hush for now.
Major rap figure.
Icon.
A true icon.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah, you done Russell Simmons, you done Russell Simmons books, you done Charlemagne's books, you
Rev Run.
I mean,
My man Tyrese. Yes,
Tyrese. For people who listen who may not, know your work and just learning more about you could check back. We've done a bunch of episodes with Chris Morrow.
Yeah.
First off, I want to say that we always send prayers and with the Lyme disease, and I hope that you could get better each day.
Thank you.
I'm proud of it's so crazy. Sometimes I sit back, like when I sent you that picture, I just look at those moments and I really appreciate like how many years we've come. You know what I mean? Like I look at you and it makes me very proud.
Thank you. You too. And I'll share something on that note. I don't want to give away too much of this upcoming mogul thing, but we, Matt Nelson got an interview with Just Blaze.
Yeah.
That I was able to hear and a little bit of, and I'll share this thing. He said something that kind of struck me, where he said, when you're making history, you're never aware of it, right? When you're in the middle of something, doing something that people are going to remember, you never have that sense that you're doing it. You're just doing it, and that's what makes it special, right? You're so caught up in it. And he said that was the case with Rockefeller. He's like, we never sat around thinking, oh, we're making these historical songs. We're just caught up in the process of making it. And he said the same thing about Combat Jack Show. He said, we weren't sitting there thinking, oh, we're creating this new space in hip hop podcasting. We're making these legendary shows that people are going to be talking about years later. No, we're just doing it. And that's something that really really kind of stuck with me is it is true. Like, you don't think, right? Did you ever
No.
sit there and be like, you're just trying to make it through that night. You're just trying to make something that's like going to be hot the next day that people are talking about. Like it's all kind
Staying
of
relevant within
you're
that
trying to.
week.
You're like swimming. You know,
Yeah.
you're just trying to stay afloat. And doggy paddling, backstroke, sinking, taking on water, then up again. And you know, it did make me kind of reflect a little. You know, and I can remember being so stressed out every time with the Combat Jack show. You know, with the studios or the drinking or the smoking. Or,
Yeah, we would drive you crazy.
I was going crazy. And, you know, when I look back on it now, even only maybe, you know, like 4 years later, I'm like, oh, shit, that was history.
Yeah.
Those were classic episodes. I should have been fucking celebrating every night. You know, we should have been going crazy every night, you know. But when you're in the middle of something, it's like so I'd always felt that. But to hear Just, who is someone who's done it twice and on a bigger level, because you can say, well, you know, maybe Combat Jack show was history, maybe it wasn't. I don't know. The Rockefeller shit was clearly
absolutely.
There's no question about that. So for him to be able to kind of put his finger on it and say, no, like this is really what happens. Like I was like, oh shit, like that's how it went down. That's why I felt that way. Like that's why I never was like confident about what was happening, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I was always
we did
stressing.
drive you crazy.
Yeah, you guys.
You know, I think about the time I locked the door on you.
That was classic.
You know,
but in retrospect, that's classic,
no,
right?
I know, but you know what I realized, and you know what made me realize when you just said about corporate, like. Not saying I don't ever look at you as corporate, but maybe that was us turning a little bit corporate. You know what I mean? Where it's like I had to listen to somebody. Where Reggie just let me do whatever the hell I want. You know?
Well, that's kind of the irony, right?
After that night, I really was like, all right, I got to listen to Chris. You know?
But that's the irony of it, which was people kind of saw me as like the button-up white guy, right?
Yeah.
The business guy. I'm fucking nuts. I don't know what I'm doing. You know, like I can remember like when Tax had his. That live. Did you go to his live show?
In Philly, I think I went.
Yeah, well, that was crazy too. But the New York one was like out of control. And I remember getting dressed to go there, and I told my wife, I was like, I need to put on a fucking blazer, just so I seem like a fucking old middle-aged white guy. Somebody's got to seem like not in control, but you know what I mean. Like, and sure enough, like at the end of the night, it was chaos, and you know, I was trying to like. Physically hurt. People wouldn't leave the theater. Like, you know, the security guard was standing on a table, screaming.
Really?
They came into the theater. There was like the woman who ran the venue grabbed me and pulled me and goes, "Look at this." They turned the lights on. There were like 400 Douce bottles, just like every seat had like a Douce bottle underneath it. And the security guard jumped up on the table and was like. Started to scream like, "You get the fuck out of here!" And I told him, I said, "You don't want to do this, man." Yeah. I was like, "You don't want to do this. Don't fight this fight, man. It's gonna go south for you quickly, you know." Because I kind of saw everyone like turn around and look at him, like, you know, what? Let me get this. And then you know, I kind of like went through the crowd and was like, they were like, "Okay, Chris, fine.
We gotta get out of here.
Chris says it's time to go home. It's all right, you know." So I was like, "All right, I guess somebody's kind of got to be the corporate guy or the suit to some respect, and you know now it's all suits.
Yeah,
you know it's all suits now. So
well, hopefully we keep it alive, man. Listen,
a little bit longer.
People listening, you know, podcast world, podcasters. Maybe they have a small network. Maybe they want to get in. I always ask you this, but you know, obviously moods change of what you think about this, you know, scope. What's some advice you have for somebody that you know is in this world, meaning the podcasting world, and wants to, you know, make a splash and wants to really, you know, I guess the big question is how to, you know, not saying you could tell them how to grow, but meaning like. What's your advice to them as far as in this space in 2019? All
right, I'm going to share something that I thought of last night.
Okay.
Don't look for your idea online.
Okay.
That's going to be my advice. Because I had this moment last night where I was like, because I'm always trying to think of ideas for shows.
Sure.
And I'm like, I'm looking at the same fucking shit that everybody else is looking. You know, I'm on my Twitter feed reacting to the same GIFs, the same people, the same memes.
Sure.
I'm like, I'm not going to find anything unique here. We're all looking at the same thing. I got to read a book. I got to look other places.
Sure.
I would say look other places.
Diamond in the rough.
Somewhere. Because if you see something online and everyone else is seeing it,
Yeah.
you know? And it used to be you could go online and find somebody that's just bubbling, right? If you're bubbling online, all the big boys are already,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah, sure.
You have an idea for something, someone does an interesting thread on it. We're all staring at the same
Sure.
little pot of ideas. It feels huge, but it's actually smaller than we realize. So that's kind of the advice I gave myself. So I'll share it with everybody else. Is like, don't try to get your next idea off of Twitter or IG or whatever.
Or Facebook.
Go out into your life. Go out into the world.
Live.
Find something out there. That's where your best idea probably lives.
You may find it in the, in the woods or whatever.
You find it in your family.
And you know what? I'll give advice to people in podcasts. Say this: don't be afraid to get your hands dirty in other parts of podcasting. You never know how that could help you in the future. I think you could be, if you're a talent, don't think that you can't learn how to edit or produce.
Oh, I'll take it a step further, man. You want to make money? You really want to make money? Fuck making shows, man. Come up with a platform. Come up with a new way to listen to podcasts. I can't do it, but if I could, my mind doesn't work that way. That'd be the first thing I do, because that's where the money is. The money is not in the content. The money is coming up with a new app or a new platform or delivery system or metric, whatever it is. Like, if your mind works in that ways, mine doesn't. But if your mind works those ways and you can think of an idea, that's how you're going to make the real money. Come up with some shit, make it work, and then you want to flip something, that's what you flip.
Yeah.
In fact, that's the email I'll respond to. I'll tell you right now.
There you go.
You want to get me to respond to an email? Hit me with like some real...
Hey, Chris, I'm working on something. And,
yes. You will hear back from me on that. If you email me and you say, hey, me and my friends, we have this show. We talk a little bit about music.
Divorced.
Nah, I'm probably not going to respond. But if you're like, hey, I got this pretty good idea for a podcast delivery app, but I'm not sure who to take it to, I know. So you tell me and we'll do it. There you
Bring him in. There we go. Internets, listen, the one and only, my friend Chris Morrow. Brr. See you next episode. Cheers.